Hello, I'm Gordon Lang, editor of CameraLabs.com. I'd like to give you a brief video tour around the Nikon D3000. Here it is, the D3000. This is Nikon's latest budget entry-level DSLR and the true successor to models like the D40 and the D60. I've got it mounted here with the DX 18 to 55mm VR lens, and this is the typical lens that you'll see sold with the D3000 when you buy it in a kit. Now the D3000, like many of Nikon's other recent DSLRs, borrows a great deal from its predecessor and also cherry picks a few extra features from other models in the range. So let's take a look at the highlights. The D3000 is equipped with exactly the same 10 megapixel CCD sensor as its predecessor the D60 and also the D40X and D80 before them. Now this sensor is capable of delivering some really great looking results, and you can see exactly how the D3000 compares against its biggest rivals, the Canon EOS 1000D or Rebel XS and the Sony Alpha A230 in my full review over at CameraLabs.com. However, it's important to note right now that by inheriting this older sensor, the D3000 unfortunately has neither live view nor movie mode facilities. Although to be fair, there aren't movie modes on any budget DSLRs right now, and live view isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion either. Around the back of the camera, Nikon's fitted a bigger screen than before, a 3-inch model, although the same 230K resolution as its predecessor. Like the D60, we're pleased to say that the information rotates when you turn the camera on its side, so it's always upright and easy to read. Unfortunately though, the bigger screen has come at a small price. Anyone familiar with the D60 will notice that the sensors below the viewfinder are now missing. These used to switch the screen off when you brought your eye to the viewfinder. Now you have to press the info button instead to switch the screen off, or of course wait for the power saving to kick in instead. In a significant upgrade over its predecessor, the D3000 is now equipped with the same 11-point autofocus system as the higher-end D5000 and D90 models. This is a big upgrade over the earlier D60, D40X and D40, which all featured fairly basic 3-point AF systems. And better still, the D3000 also inherits the on-demand grid lines of the D5000 and D90, which allows you to switch a grid on and off through the optical viewfinder. This is really useful for aligning images. The continuous shooting is unchanged from its predecessor. It's 3 frames per second, and so long as you've got a sufficiently fast memory card, you should be able to continue to shoot JPEG images until you run out of memory. Here's how that sounds. Externally, the D3000 greatly resembles its predecessor, the D60. The body shape is essentially the same, and you have to look really closely to notice any differences. The first and one of the most important is on the top right surface. The earlier seen preset position on the D60 has been replaced by the D3000's new guide feature. This presents a step-by-step process to achieving certain creative effects, and I'll be showing you more about that in just a moment. Turn the camera to the rear and you'll see the other major change between this and the D60, a larger 3-inch screen. Otherwise the controls are pretty much the same. The ports are too. Behind this door you'll find an SD memory card slot. Below the camera, the battery compartment. Unfortunately, there's still no official battery grip option. And to the side of the camera, behind this single door, 2 ports. At the top, a standard TV output, and at the bottom, a USB port. So unfortunately, Nikon has not been able to fit HDMI to this camera. The Nikon D3000 is all about ease of use and making first-time DSLR owners feel as much at home as possible, and this starts by inheriting the already friendly user interface of the D60. Like that model, there's a graphical representation of the aperture and shutter speed on the left-hand side of the screen. And to show how that works, I've switched into aperture priority mode here, indicated by the letter A, and I'm going to turn this thumb wheel here to show you what happens. You'll see the F number increase here as I turn the dial, but you'll also notice this graphical iris getting smaller and smaller on the left-hand side. This is a graphical representation of what will actually happen inside your lens when you take the picture. So it's quite nice to see exactly what's going on here if you're a beginner to this sort of thing. But if you're after a more conventional interface, simply go into the menu, choose the info display format, and switch that from graphic to classic. Now when I go back, you'll see this more conventional looking display with the aperture and shutter speed only shown numerically. Like the D60, I can press this question mark button for context sensitive help at any point. If I press it now, it will explain what aperture priority actually does. Likewise, if I actually cover the lens here to make the exposure too short, you'll notice that question mark now flashing. This means the camera wants to tell me something. I'll press the question mark button again. It's saying the lighting is poor, I recommend you use the flash. So again, this is exactly the same as you had on the earlier D60, but it does make the D3000 very easy to use. Changing settings is also done in the same way as the D60. You press this little I button here in the corner, and you'll notice one of the options up here along the side has now been highlighted yellow. Now this one is actually the image quality, and if I press OK, I can choose to change that, say, to fine compression instead. And likewise, I can move this highlighter over any other setting I want, maybe the ISO sensitivity. Press OK and I can choose a different sensitivity, and again there's little thumbnail images on the side to show me how I might use that sensitivity. Now this is all very friendly, but unfortunately it can be quite slow to use at times. If I now want to change, say, the active D-lighting option, I have to scroll all the way down here, and then once I've set that, if I want to change the quality, I've got to click all the way back up again. So this is quite a laborious process, when in fact Nikon could have done what its rivals do and allow these controls here around the rocker buttons to double up. Maybe if you press up it could change the ISO, press right it could change the white balance. That would certainly make things much easier if you're an enthusiast who's already familiar with the way it works. But so far so similar to the D60, so I want to show you something different now by switching the D3000 to its headline new guide mode. Now we're in the guide option, and you can see that that conventional interface has now been swapped by something which looks much more like a wizard from a piece of computer software. That's exactly how it works. You've got three main options here: shoot, view and delete, and setup. And these actually guide you through various goal-oriented activities. That's what happens when you go into shoot. So I've now got three options: easy operation, advanced operation, and timers and remote control. If I go into easy operation, this is basically a friendlier way to access various scene presets. If I go back and have a look at advanced operation, this presents an easier way to access aperture and shutter priority. For example, maybe I want to soften backgrounds on a portrait. I click right and it says, I'm going to put you into aperture priority. I go, okay, that's fine. And now it says select the desired aperture. So I'm now increasing that, but down here it's saying choose lower f numbers to blur the background. So I'll do that, choose the lowest f number available, click OK, and now I'm ready to start shooting. Alternatively, try more settings. And at any point I can go back and choose a different option. For example, now maybe I want to freeze motion. Here it's saying I'm going to switch you into shutter priority mode. Click OK, and now choosing the shutter speed here, and it's saying choose faster shutter speeds to freeze the motion. Now this is all very well, but it still requires that you know a little bit about cameras, because it's saying choose a faster shutter speed. Well, what does this number actually mean here? If you already understand photography, you'll know that shutter speeds are expressed normally as fractions. But for a complete beginner, they may not know that going up to 1/500 would be twice as fast as 1/250. But remember, we are in the advanced options mode. If you go back, you can always choose the easy operation instead. Go back again, and you see a similar interface for viewing photos or going through the setup. Again, this shows a nicer, simplified view of those setup menus. So the guide mode certainly makes things much easier for complete beginners, and this is a key selling point for the D3000. And finally, I want to go back to a normal shooting mode to show you a couple of ways that Nikon's discreetly but usefully changed some of the playback options. I press the play button to show an image that I took earlier. Previously, you could pretty much only show the brightness histogram. In order to see RGB histograms, you had to go into a color balance retouching menu. Well, no longer. The D3000 inherits similar playback menus to higher end bodies. As such, if I push up, you can see the brightness histogram and advanced shooting information there. Several pages of more details. There's some flashing highlights. And there, finally, the brightness and red, green and blue histograms, all directly from the play menu without any tricks involved. The D3000 also features a number of in-camera retouching tricks. If I go to the menu here, go down to the retouching menu, there's quite a neat miniature effect. This works in a similar way to using a tilt-shift lens, and it works best with views which are looking down from a great height. Here's a handy one that we actually use for our coverage examples. It's saying now select an area. I'm going to go for this one here, and to preview the effect I'm going to press the magnify button. And you can see what this has done is kept this thin strip here in sharp focus and blurred the rest of the image, and this makes it look like a small model. The effect may be quite discreet to see on the screen here, but it really is quite fun in practice. The Nikon D3000 is one of the most affordable and approachable DSLRs on the market today. Nikon's really succeeded in its goals to make this camera as easy to use as possible. The context-sensitive help system of earlier Nikon DSLRs was already pretty good, but Nikon's further enhanced that with the new guide mode on the D3000. If you're a complete beginner, just switch this camera to guide and it will take you through the various processes involved to achieve those creative effects that you've always wanted to get, but never been quite sure how to achieve. Then behind the scenes you've got that sophisticated 11-point autofocus system and Nikon's legendary metering to ensure a very high success rate on your photographs. So all in all, the D3000 is ideal for beginners, somebody who's buying their very first DSLR. But while it can delight these users, it can also frustrate those more experienced owners. The user interface is a little bit too slow for accessing various settings. You could be pressing buttons many times just to change things like the sensitivity or white balance. Now that's not going to bother many beginners, but it will bother some enthusiasts who are just after a DSLR on a budget. There are also a number of other aspects that are actually missing from the D3000 that enthusiasts may expect to get, and I've detailed all of those in my review at cameralabs.com. So if you're a complete beginner or buying your first DSLR, the D3000 could be perfect. It really guides you through the process and takes great quality pictures without any effort. But if you're after something a bit more sophisticated, you may find models like Canon's EOS 1000D or Rebel XS a better bet. As always, there's a great deal to weigh up between these cameras, and of course there's also Sony's Alpha A230, which features built-in image stabilization, and at the time I made this video it's also one of the cheapest DSLRs available. So to help you make the choice between these three DSLRs, head on over to my full review at cameralabs.com. There I've compared all the features and the image quality to help you make the right choice.